Mobile television units, portable TV stations on wheels are now experimenting with remote transmissions to bring you history in the making.
Introducing ASG's Virtual Truck.
ASG's Virtual Truck.
A groundbreaking cloud-based remote production solution for live sports, esports, events, and music. Globally distributed production teams, collaborating in sync at a fraction of the cost and carbon footprint for a physical truck and its traveling team.
With an ultra-modern system of interconnected nodes and workstations, finally you no longer need a physical truck. Work from anywhere.
Virtual truck operators and artists can work from anywhere. With resolution and frame rate agnostic high-performance tools, professional comms, a cost-effective price point, and a sustainable carbon-friendly environment. Plus, a fully equipped virtual truck sets up and is ready to roll in just a few hours.
Traditional production will be discontinued for an indefinite period.
Plug into the future of remote production with ASG's Virtual Truck. Contact us today.
All right, I guess we're applauding videos. This is great. Who better to applaud videos than video people? All right, so this panel is all about how do we look at making 2110 work for people who don't have a $1 billion budget and 8 years of network experience. In putting this panel together, the idea really was, we have these changes in the marketplace, and we have a fair amount of adoption. This room, as I was saying earlier, was built in 2016, I believe, and was one of the first 2110 spaces. And I don't know, Gary, when you get to your intro, you can talk about what the budget was, if it's not a total secret, but let's just say it was not inexpensive. And so we're going to run this panel with, everybody will do an introduction, and then it's going to be all questions that I'll throw out, and then we'll get to, hopefully you guys will have a lot of questions. So with that, Bob.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Caniglia from Blackmagic Design. I'm the Director of Sales Operations for the Americas. And in September, it'll be 15 years that I've been at Blackmagic. I was at DaVinci, and they bought us, and they got me in the trade.
Hi, I'm Chin Ko from Net Insight. I actually lead a small team of solutions engineers focus on cloud-based solutions and 2110 transmissions across wide area networks.
I'm Gary Schneider. I'm a senior staff media systems engineer, and I'm the lead media systems architect for LinkedIn.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Thomas True from NVIDIA. I'm a senior applied engineer for professional video. Professional video that's traditionally been SDI, and now it's 2110. So I work with developers and system integrators on taking the video and video essence in 2110 and getting it in and out of the GPU efficiently for broadcast and post-production.
Hi, I'm Steve Young. I am Senior Principal Consultant at ASG, and I have a 30-year background in design and systems integration.
Okay, we can pass it back down to Bob. We're going to skip the weird-looking lav this time and try and make it so you guys can actually hear. All right. So our first question that I want to have everybody address today is, what is the most important thing in your company and your minds in driving adoption around 2110? Is it cost? Is it performance? Is it complexity?
I think what we decided to do was to introduce a small array of products to help people get started to do 2110, right? So it becomes this hybrid situation where, they're doing a small, I don't know, church, a school, whatever, but they need to send a signal, on the network somewhere else in the facility, and they can do it relatively easy with some point-to-point devices that we made. So most of it is we were trying to build products, design products that made it easy for video people, for lack of a better term, to use some 2110 stuff. And we created our own codec that we've introduced to the wild so anyone can adopt it. So we can do 4K at 60 frames per second down 10 gig copper.
Jen.
Okay, so this is a difficult one. Making it easy it's never easy, right? We've done 2110 installations, and there's a great deal of complexity. But what we've been doing is a lot of a wide area network distribution, right? So to hit RAMI applications, the easiest thing that we can use is to use public internet, right? So a lot of ARQ is involved. So a lot of our product focus right now is about how to actually leverage the cloud and public internet to actually distribute content, right? How to make it secure is also a key aspect of our workflow. So once it gets in the facility, then when it gets turned into 2110, the other things that we are looking at is how do we actually simplify it. Now, we all know about NMOS. NMOS can be used for 2110, right? But we've also started seeing NMOS being actually used for orchestration of transport streams over IP. TS flows to make it easier to actually route all the way from a facility to another facility, but also to manage it in an integrated fashion with the 2110 network itself. So we're no longer seeing separated networks like 2110 is the in-facility side, and we look at transport streams or the compressed networks, right? So now it's all coming together. So key for us is also about next-gen APIs. How do we actually build workflows that make it so much easier for end users? So to your point, Gary, the devices out there today have very rich APIs. We do need to leverage that. We need to simplify it, and I think that a REST API is definitely the way to go to make everything a lot easier.
The decision here to go IP was, when I was starting, the ask was global interoperability, to be able to share media between all of our facilities, and IP made sense. It was relatively new. 2110 wasn't really a thing. It was 2022-6 is what we started with. And then we've transitioned into 2110. And it's a continuing journey. I talked a bit about like the orchestration, but what Chin was just talking about is a big part of what we're dealing with now as well, is TR07, TR08, 2110 uncompressed, and how that can all work within the same media network. So there are plenty of challenges, but that was our reasoning. Network IP was the way to go.
At NVIDIA, the integration of 2110 and making it easier started it was announced in 2017 and culminated in 2020 when NVIDIA acquired Mellanox in their network cards to do SMPTE 2110. And with that, we started making it easier to interface the essence streams from 2110 with the GPU, starting with GPU Direct, and where we can transfer the buffers directly between the cards without having to go through system memory, which reduces the latency and also reduces the jitter in a system by having the extra PCIe data transfer and other things going on in the system. By reducing the jitter, the system is much more stable, and you're much more likely to have a 2110 essence stream on the output side that's actually compliant to the spec. And that's continued with what we call Holoscan for Media, which is a platform that we've been working on now. If we could go to the slides. So yeah, the next slide. So it's all about, as all of you know, working in this industry, that we're moving to this software-defined infrastructure, right? So we no longer have bespoke pieces of hardware to do different things. It's all hardware applications running on common off-the-shelf hardware controlled by a control plane, something like NMOS. And then if we go to the next slide, and what's this do? It gives us an open platform that's based on IP, it's IT managed. You can develop once on like a single node, and then you can deploy on a cluster where you have redundancy and all of these things. And it's open platform built on open standards. And if we go to the next slide, so the Holoscan for Media infrastructure, going from the bottom to the top, it starts with servers built on common off-the-shelf hardware. On top of that, we add Kubernetes in the proof of concept in the platform we're working on now, which is on-prem. It uses Red Hat OpenShift. And then you have operators on top of that. In OpenShift, you have operators for the GPU that control the GPU interfaces. You have network operators for the network interfaces. You have SROV for the sharing of the hardware across multiple instances of applications. And then you have Helm charts for deploying the applications which are developed in Docker containers, and at the top, you have instances of your applications that are deployed on a cluster. And the goal here is to take a SMPTE 2110. It doesn't have to be SMPTE 2110 in this case. It could be NDI. It could be Dante. It could be any application that does network video or audio over the network, and be able to easily deploy these on a common infrastructure using common off-the-shelf hardware and servers, and scale from single node cluster to multiple node clusters with redundancy and all those things that you would need. So we call that Holoscan for Media. Right now we're engaging developers, developing and moving their applications to the platform, and it's a step up for a lot of developers. We've kind of tried to take some of the hard work out of it, but they need to learn Kubernetes and Helm and deployment of the application, but it's an attempt to make it easier and scalable.
Thank you. I would say, having done 2110 implementations in 2019 and then just this past year with Pac-12, that's certainly easier. I mean, it's certainly, it's not easy. It's complex. I think biggest factors are NMOS adoption by vendors, and also I would say we're much better at training than we used to be, and that actually makes the adoption of the new systems easier for the end users.
So we'll start here and go back. You get to go twice. So Steve, we're looking at a world now where we're beginning to see people like Netgear get involved, and Blackmagic, who traditionally has been a price leader. We see Holoscan for Media, which potentially could lower costs because we're going to have a lot less dedicated hardware. And so in your mind, what becomes the biggest stumbling point from a deployment point of view? What do these people need to know that they don't know today?
I think the biggest stumbling block is configuration, right? Because that's the difference between a baseband SDI implementation and 2110. It's configuration, and there's still a lot of arcane knowledge around how to configure even the simplest of 2110 systems. But I think what's starting to get better, what we're starting to see, is not only the adoption of NMOS, which makes things a little easier, but the REST APIs and how there are software applications that are now making configuration easier. Where especially, I think Netgear is a good example, where they have applications that are targeted to broadcast AV engineers that will pre-configure switches for you on a network based on what your end devices are.
So Thomas, in particular with Holoscan, I'm curious, as part of NVIDIA's goals for that program, part of the idea is that you could have pre-configured server clusters and then just user deployable Docker containers.
Correct. Yeah, I think the biggest stumbling block for us right now and things we're working through is right sizing. So you have a cluster of nodes running Kubernetes, OpenShift. How many applications can you deploy on that node and still keep your SMPTE 2110 packet pace timing and be spec compliant on the back end? How many AI applications can you run? How many mixers? So we're kind of working through that now and coming up with the recipes and the cookbooks that we can then pass on to customers to make it easier. So I'd say the right sizing is the problem, or what we're working through now.
So as the guy who's been running one for a while, what would you do differently that would make it easier for people who don't have the background? NMOS clearly is a key.
NMOS is clearly a key. What would I wished I had done differently is not do it. Because
okay, how many technology people here have not had that feeling at least once?
I mean, because it was a real struggle early on. I think what comes to mind when I'm thinking about it is tooling. Tooling is getting better. That allows a broadcast engineer to be able to look into a network and kind of get some human readable feedback. You know, I'm still CLI, I'm ConfT, you know, and having to go in and try to figure things out, thanks to Tim Nesbitt, my buddy over there, who's helped me a lot while he was here. And those are some of the struggles, but what I'm excited to see are things like what Blackmagic is doing and Netgear that are making these implementations easier. They're not simple, but they are easier. When we talk about NMOS, it is interoperability. No matter how many JTNM sessions happen, you're not getting everybody. You're trying to implement these certain devices into your network, and then you go blind reading JSON. So it's been interesting.
Chin, I'm really curious with your tools, you know, do you see a day when we could begin to see much more user configurable systems or approaching more like Dante or NDI?
So that's a very interesting point, because the biggest problem that I've always had is actually proper documentation, understanding what needs to be configured from the start. And the problem with 2110 networks is that there are so many things that needs to be managed, and not defining the actual workflow up front creates a lot of headaches for us. So a simple thing like changing a single UDP port, for example, over a facility, that's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of potential configuration changes. So to us, what we're embarking on right now is a method of making it a lot more user-friendly from configuration perspective. Right? How do we actually simplify it? You know, to your point, Gary, about making it human readable. Beyond that, it's also about how do we actually correct mistakes that, you know, it will always be made, right? So how do we actually go back and make changes without disrupting the entire workflow? That's really, really, really difficult for us right now. All right, so the simplest issue that we've had today, a system that we're trying to build, it's a simple 32 by 32 wide area network transmission to a facility. That translates to about 700 plus multicast addresses, right? And a lot of this had to be pre-programmed. When we started it out, we were given a set, then they decided, oh, we made a mistake. So we have had to go back and correct it, and now we're rushing trying to figure out how could we have stopped that from happening, and are there tools that's out there that can help us limit the issues that we face. So that's what we're really working on, redefining our REST APIs to make sure that it's cleaner, and then making it easier and documenting it. And as in one of the previous speakers talked about documentation. Documentation is key everywhere, and there really needs to be a single source of truth, right? We can't have documentation in every location, everyone having their own. It needs to be a shared document that everyone can work off on. So that's where we kind of stand today.
Okay, Bob. So you've got to start in 2110 at new price points. How do you see the evolution of this for people beginning today? You know, I am sitting in my media center at X Corporation, and I'm been telling everybody that we are going to head to 2110 or to some kind of IP transport. What happens now? So what we wanted to do was to help people that have existing systems, you know, bring 2110 into it. So, for instance, you know, you already have, say, a closed system like this, but now you want to be able to bring in a camera and a person from a remote location. We had some devices that did that, but this is more of an expansion on that, so that you can, you know, control the camera remotely and to be able to bring in that person, but then get it integrated into your current SDI workflow. Because we realize not everybody's going to rip everything out and start over right now. So, and we also know that some of the, I mean, what we're targeting, and we have a 16-port switch that's coming out, right? So we're not trying to do it for here.
but we're trying to do it for all the little places to get people. And we made it so that it doesn't look like a regular Ethernet router. It looks like a video router, because that's what we wanted to make it, so that the plugs are in the back for the Ethernet, and there's a front panel that you just pick what you want and where it's going to go, because that's what we've been doing with video forever. So we wanted to develop this sort of hybrid situation so that people kind of get introduced to using it, but not in such a way that they have to go back to school to learn how to do it. And I, for one, look forward to it, because I don't want to have to go back to school to use it. So I'm looking forward to plugging in some of these things and it being as easy as we're doling out. But as I say, we're not trying to bring a 1,000 by 1,000 router in and do that. We're trying to put in some products to get people so they can use it into the systems that they already have without having to start over.
All right, so in our back and forth passing the ubiquitous mic,
Yeah.
so then, Bob, I think that really strikes the next question I'd like to, have everybody look at, which is, so why would you do this? What's the advantage? What are you looking to gain out of this other than some amount of hair loss?
Right, so part of it is, we've been asked why we don't support some of the other codecs in the space, right? And a lot of it comes down to licensing, right? So you got to license some of those or whatever. So us, we're big at creating our own codec that's free and putting it out there. So that was part of it. But we also wanted to see if we could get 4K at 60 frames down 10 gig Ethernet. And with this codec, we can do that. And it's 10-bit, and so it's going to look really good. And which is obviously you don't want people at home to go, oh, I see when they switch to the remote site, it looks terrible, right? So you want them to you want it to look good, right? So that's part of it. The other thing that one of the other devices that we created is for like the podium, right? So that one, because lately when I go to do something like this and I have to bring a laptop, they won't let you bring a laptop anymore. They want the slides in advance and all that stuff. And it's like, I'm not that prepared. So, but we made this new box that you put on the podium and then you just plug in your laptop and it does all the work for you. Because what happens most of the time is people are like, oh, you have to have it set to this setting because the projectors or whatever, the room doesn't accept it. That doesn't matter. You plug in your laptop, it powers it. It sends the signal either through HDMI or through 10 gig or whatever you need it to do, so that it makes it easier for everyone and nobody has to worry about, because I've been, not recently, but in the last 10 years, I've been to places where it took us 25 minutes to figure out how to get the right resolution to hit the projector that's in the room. And so that's some of the other things that we're trying to create, just little pockets of products to help people without them having to go back to school, basically.
We didn't have that problem at all this morning, did we, Gary? So, Chin, why would people want to do this?
That's a good question. I think that initially, when we first look at 2110, generally speaking, about 20 to 25% over the cost of an SDI infrastructure in order to build out 2110 facility. It has flipped a little bit, but I think the biggest issue is just that everyone's moving away from SDI now. You have to kind of look at what's available out there. If you're building a brand new facility, trying to build a network that's based or facility based on SDI is nigh impossible at this point, right? So we are looking towards tech as to making it our lives easier to kind of gain the economies of scales that we get from using commonly off-the-shelf equipment. It does give us some benefits in terms of switching. It makes it a lot easier if you know what you're doing. I know that's a bitter pill to swallow. We've learned our lessons, a lot of lessons over the years. But it does give us the ease of switching content fairly quickly without direct access, right? Because everything's on a single switch or multiple switches. All the content's already there with the right APIs and workflows. You get your content anywhere across the world. Right, today, concept of a centralized control room, for example, serving multiple studios, to actually do that in real time and make it simple, I don't see that happening in a traditional SDI infrastructure. We really need to leverage the power of IP in general, and 2110 is a way of getting us there. Is it the correct solution? I think it's the current solution. It may change, but we are definitely making a lot of advances in that area.
Okay, Gary. Now you really get to answer.
Why would I do this? We're a campus. We're an enterprise network. This facility, which we've talked about today, I'm horrible at that.
I know, audio guys and microphones. It's a problem.
Audio guys and microphones. This facility is connected with another facility that's a couple of miles down the road. It's all operating, it's the same media network, it's the same broadcast controller and all of that. We can kind of distribute the technology to various locations. We have a third facility that's down the road that's probably a SFP away from connecting into that network as well. What's the benefit? We look at it as that there's a lot of possibility around utilization, where traditionally you might build multiple facilities with the same complement of equipment because you want them to do very much the same thing. We can look at it and say, well, out of the 3 facilities, at any one time, we're only using X number of record channels. Do we need to have 4 times what we really need? Or do we just need, the right amount? And 2110, I mean, we're not quite there with WAN yet. We'll be talking. But the idea is that if I need additional record channels, we just route to another facility. We've run into real world situations where our graphics device went dead locally, and we route from another facility, and our op logs into that unit, and we can use it. So it's just resources on a network. So in our application, it made a lot of sense to be IP and to leverage that. And if we have compression, now we have TR08 and JPEG XS. That's going to allow us to use our same media network to move those source signals around. And that was really one of the big pluses for us.
So other than wanting to drive up NVIDIA stock with more GPUs.
Oh, I was going to say that.
What's driving NVIDIA's initiative around this in terms of, how is this going to make it, what advantages is this going to bring to the end users?
Well, I mean, with software-defined workflows in a common platform that has GPUs and NICs that drive up the stock price, but besides that, with one platform, you can do broadcast graphics, you can do your lower thirds, you can do AI inference for translation, for closed captioning, for player tracking, or you can do transcoding. You can do it all on the same system. You don't need bespoke systems for all those things. And you can build workflows using the same system that's IT managed and with the goal of being easier to use and manage and deploy. Basically, that's our goal.
So ideally, in a real-world operation, these systems would be simpler because you're going to have less boxes having to interact with each other and less of a network around them.
Right, and they'd be all the same boxes, so they'd be easy to manage. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Let's see. 3 things come to mind when justifying 2110 to me. I think the first one is just scalability. And depending on how you architect your network, you have built-in scalability there to expand your router matrix, for example. I mean, try that with a hardware kind of baseband router frame, right? I mean, it's the limits to the expandability, where with 2110, it's almost unlimited. The other I would say would be compatibility with future codecs. Now we have JPEG XS and others, as they become available in the future, you can expand to make your network more efficient. And thirdly, I would say less cabling, just with bidirectional signals and multiple signals per cable, not to mention that sync can run on your cable as well, PTP sync and control ANC data. It's just a more efficient cabling infrastructure.
As good a choice as any. All right, so now we come to the crux of this, and then we're going to go to Q&A. All right, Steve, so I'm Fred's house of worship, and I'm starting from scratch. How are you going to counsel me? Am I going to go NDI? Am I going to do a small 2110? Am I going to do SDI? What would you tell them today?
Today, before telling them anything, I think I'd ask a lot more questions about what they're doing today and what they want to do in the future and what that roadmap looks like. And before selecting any specific technology for them to choose or recommend. That scenario could perfectly...
What specific answers to questions would drive you towards 2110?
I think scalability, the initial scale of the installation, whether it's small, whether it's expansive, it could be either or somewhere in between. Staff to support it is also very critical.
All right, Thomas, it's your turn.
I don't have a whole lot to add, but yeah, I mean, it's going to take the right people to support the platform, and they need to at least have a basic understanding of what they're installing and setting up. So yeah, you got to ask the right questions, and from those questions, try to point them in the right direction. But I mean, for me, it would be a 2110 based platform because it'll scale. They can start small and then scale up. I mean, maybe it's not holoscan for media, maybe it's something else, but that's the place to start.
Other than don't do it.
No, I'm past that. I mean, I agree with what these gents have said, particularly around 2110. I think what I would add and talk to are the tools. For the most part, I think everybody that's thought about, do you take a broadcast engineer and teach them network, or do you get a network engineer and try to teach them broadcast? Most, I believe, feel you want a broadcast engineer first to just understand the dynamic of the productions and all of that. And you can teach network. But what's really exciting to me and what I'm seeing is the tooling is getting a lot better, which is allowing a broadcast engineer that doesn't have a significant networking experience to be able to work in the environment and to be able to get in and troubleshoot problems. We recently had a situation where an engineer was putting an SDI lens on an IP problem and ended up down a rat hole. And
no eye pattern to chase there.
Right. And I looked at that situation and just kind of leaned back and was like, what can help that? What can fix that? And it is the tooling. And the tooling is out there and it's getting better. We're not using names today. We can talk later. But that's what's exciting me right now. That's going to make it easier for lots of facilities at different sizes and scale to be able to implement and maintain.
Okay, so I believe that smaller facilities tend to have a wider or larger amount of problems, but smaller problems that needs to be solved. One thing that comes to mind about 2110 is that it's IP native, and there is, in essence, a lot of built-in flexibility in it. One thing that I've kind of bumped up against is that SDI kind of constrains our resolutions and formats, for example. We're living in a world where everything is media, whether it's direct to the consumer or into the cloud. We are no longer bounded by SDI frame rates. Why are we still doing that? So 2110 gives us the gives us the flexibility to consider other codecs, other resolutions, other formats, and also opens up the possibilities of cloud processing, because a lot of these smaller entities do not have the ability to manage it themselves. They have to outsource it, and the best value of that is to push a lot of these workflows into the cloud and make use of and leverage third-party systems. Right? So why constrain yourself in a facility and live within the old box that we've kind of painted ourselves into?
So, if I remember the question, it was a
Used to walk
small.
down there,
It was like a small church that's going to do something, right? If that guy came to me today, I'd say, look, I mean, sure, there's lots of questions what I ask. How much money do you have? How many people are going to be able to use this thing? Because a lot of times, and we've had this over the last couple of years with COVID and whatnot. And my PR team thinks I work for Stream Deck, but I tell them, you get a Stream Deck, you program it right, and you can have it do a lot of things for you. But I think right now, a church, usually the challenge is, okay, we're going to have a couple of cameras, and we're going to record it, or we're going to stream it at the same time. But we also need to get a feed down to the crying room that's down the hall, right? So if you did a traditional SDI workflow, which I always say doesn't buffer, you can use that, but you can also use some 2110 stuff to get signals down the road to the crying room or whatnot. So there's some hybrid stuff that right today, you can do to make that work. But it's like, I have a friend of mine, his son went to college and he couldn't operate anything in his house, because he's the one that programmed the TV and everything else. So they have to watch on their laptops because until he gets home from college, they can't watch anything. So what good is that to build a facility for somebody that nobody can use? So you have to take those steps now. And of course, I think, 2 years from now, 5 years, whatever, it's a changing environment, clearly. But if the guy came to me today and he didn't have any experience with that, I think I'm going to have to stick with the tried and true, but have some additional 2110 things to solve problems that they have in a small environment. For coming here, that's a whole different discussion.
I like your argument that's an excellent argument for job security. So the real answer is you want to talk your employer into doing a 2110 facility so that they can't get rid of you because nobody else will know how it was actually set up.
Right, when the guy says 2110, 2110, 2112, whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's it.
Then you have a problem.
All right, questions? Or was this so informative nobody has anything else they want to know? That's. Closer.
Have you thought about incorporating virtual reality cameras into the setup and what that would look like in the future?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of workflows now that use virtual reality, sort of, in the sense like there's a lot of remote production now that's being done in green screens and LED walls and all those kind of things. We had a new camera that's been announced by Apple for their workflow, and so we'll see where that takes us. So, the thing about it is there's a lot of new I'm going to say expectations of what things need to be done in the future, and as manufacturers, you have to anticipate some of it and adjust and pivot to what you need to do. And so I think that's where we're headed. But I don't know if we all have to get the glasses now and the cameras. I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
Well, that all depends on who programmed it. By the way, when you ask your question, feel free to direct if you have a specific person that you would like to answer the question.
Yeah, this is for the panel in general. It's really encouraging to see JPEG XS so widely adopted at this year's NAB. It's a major problem solver, especially paired with TR07. And so that brings to light the idea of this native JPEG XS environment all the way through TR07, TR08. I was hoping to get some opinions on where you see that going, what you observed with vendor adoption, specifically in finding an elegant, lightweight solution to move JPEG XS between the 07 and 08 and other aspects of a system like that.
I'll just make a comment about that first because, So JPEG XS and TR07, we are seeing increased adoption of it. The interoperability is actually okay. It's not great. There's still some issues out there. One of the conundrums we have is that what does it actually buy us over JPEG 2000? Now, given that JPEG 2000 was slightly more complex, but from a cost perspective, is there a real need to go into JPEG XS? That's always the biggest problem for us. Now, people talk about latency, but where is the threshold of latency that really starts affecting your production? Right? I think the biggest mover for this is actually 12G SDI, UHD, right? Because it is native, and JPEG 2000 from its specifications doesn't call for 12G SDI native compression. Right? So it's a natural mover if you want to go into UHD. And with the correct tweaking, you actually do get very, very low latency. But eventually, is it appreciated? Now, that's the issue. The other thing that we've seen is that to get comparable quality compared to JPEG 2000, you're still looking at, we're looking at 6:1, 7:1 compression versus J2K at 10:1, 12:1. So the increase in bit rates in some applications cannot be supported, but in others, it may be able to be supported. So we are actually feeling a little bit better right now. I mean, when we first came out with JPEG XS as TR07 about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were seeing a lot of resistance. Now we're seeing a lot of more customers coming in and just say, hey, let's do JPEG XS TR07, especially over wide area networks. One facility can be purely SDI, the other facility can be purely 2110. That really helps, right? And especially since now we have a lot of the other systems that is TR07 native or TR08 native, that is also increasing the adoption in that area. So I'm hopeful. I'm hoping that you'll actually see more uptake.
Dave, we have one more question on this panel, and then we got to wrap it up in a few minutes.
Actually, the thunder was stolen a little bit. Max Pop of Everts. Given the fact that 2110 heavily relies on PTP, and for the cloud applications, it's still challenging to do a full-blown productions. The TR7 being a good format to have a high-quality system. Do you think there's a possibility for 2110 is being taken over by TR7, TR8, JPEG XS as a end-to-end full production, like cameras, switching, recording, and going all the way to compression?
Go for it, Gary.
I don't know if I have a complete answer. We're working with TR07 as our path into Azure. That is the simplest way of getting compressed, high-quality compressed streams into Azure. TR08, perhaps between facilities, that might be something that we would approach. I'd be interested if Tim's been doing anything on that. But I don't know. Chen, did you have, or does anybody else have?
So I think the problem here is that TR07, since it's an MPEG-2 transport stream, requires that the audio and video still be carried together. A lot of the workflows in the facility, audio and video is basically separate, right? So you still have to combine it somewhere. I think there are different use cases, and TR07, TR08 will be sufficient in one versus the other. The biggest problem for me is actually trying to get that high bitrate stream into the cloud, right? Because not everyone has that capability. The TR07 is not something that I would recommend for the masses, for example, right? So 1080i, we are looking at 300 megabits per second. That's not amiable. It's just not something that we can really do. So it's really for high quality, high bandwidth productions at this point. What we are seeing is that there's a lot of cloud-based transmissions that's still MPEG-2 transport stream, MPEG-4 HEVC encoded, and a conversion needs to be done. So there is a transition phase into this. Very much like how we do TR07 to 2110, then it becomes MPEG-4 or HEVC to 2110 at that point.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it there, and we've got a case study coming up from Panasonic, and then we'll have a lunch break. So if the Panasonic folks want to queue up here, let's keep going.